I love that you mentioned spiritual director several times. I want to ask you about that process of seeking one out, what to look for, because that
Ah,
seems like a very complicated task.
it is. It is. I have been very fortunate in that when I've been in different jobs in different parts of the country, I have made cautious investigations and I have been recommended people. And I think I've always gone with the first recommendation, and so far it's always worked. And on one occasion, I was staying for a retreat in a monastery, and there was one monk there who I thought, I really trust you. And a guy about my own age, just a very humble, wise, intelligent but not showy guy. And I just thought, this is somebody I can be totally honest with and open with. But it's a very, very personal thing. And I have not been a spiritual director myself, except in very limited cases. It's not been one of my particular vocations and gifts. And it is quite a specialized ministry. And some people just have a prayerful, insightful approach to life, which enables them to sit with people and to weep with people and pray with them and so on. And that's a great gift. So I don't have any particular advice, except I would imagine in any given church, certainly in mainstream churches, there will be people who you can ask, who around here would be a good spiritual director, and they will say, well, actually, a lot of people think so and so is rather good, or whatever. But it's a tricky one, and it kind of goes on under the radar quite a lot.
Yeah, because I don't hear too much about it. And I'm kind of curious, like practically, like what does that look like? Are you like you just like meet with them on a regular
Yeah,
basis?
mostly it would be meeting with them maybe 3 or 4 times a year. And I would normally expect to spend maybe between an hour and a half and 2.5 hours. An hour is a bit short, particularly if it is only 3 times a year or 4 times a year.
Mm,
Often quite a lot has gone on, and the first 20 minutes or so will be pouring out. Oh, it's so good to talk to somebody about this. And they
mm.
will be sitting and listening and nodding and praying and taking notes maybe, and then there'll be a long pause and maybe a cup of tea, and then they will ask a leading question, and they'll say, now, but how was it about such and such? And what memories did that bring up for you, or whatever? And because it's a kind of a crossover between being a psychotherapist and being a confessor. It's somewhere in between those two, and it can move imperceptibly this way and that. And those who are good at it, um, I remember introducing one student to a particular director, and she came out and said, basically, he's a psychotherapist and a Catholic. And I said, yep, that's what he is. And I said, that's what you need right now.
I love that, and it's very much again tapping into this theme of spirituality. Like that
Yeah,
is at the crux of it. Like you're
yeah,
having these spiritual conversations, and the spiritual director is kind of being led by the spirit to then provoke you of a question.
exactly. And to be able to spot if you're drifting down unhealthy paths, which we can all do, um, or to spot if you may actually be nudged in some particular direction, but for some reason there's some resistance. And, it's often a spiritual director who will say to somebody after a sort of fifth or seventh or ninth meeting, could it be that God is calling you into full-time preaching ministry or whatever? And the person will say, oh, no, not me. I couldn't possibly do that. And then 6 weeks later, they'll come back to the spiritual director and say, you know what you said to me? It's funny, but actually, da 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 da. And there is a process of discernment. In my tradition, we talk a lot about discernment, about being with somebody and together discerning what God seems to be saying to them in their lives, and which is a wonderful thing. And as a bishop, I've come in on the receiving end of that, in that when I've been charged with ordaining people, other people have prepared them and so on, and I sort of meet them halfway along the stage, or the last bits of the journey, and discover how their call was discerned and nurtured and nourished. And that's a beautiful thing, and often quite a painful thing, but then very lovely when you can pray with them and lay hands on them and send them out into a parish and get on with the job.
Hey, thank you so much for checking out this video clip from the Dogado podcast. To get more videos like this, simply subscribe here on YouTube. You can also download the full episode of each show on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, or your favorite podcast player. Take care.